So let's be honest, it's a weird time to be a guy. There's a huge online community of these alpha male lifestyles pushing for money, cars, power, going to the gym 25 hours a day. It's like masculinity has become a sort of cartoon caricature. And we live in this weird dual reality where there's a $15,000 alpha male bootcamp where you get humiliated and shouted at to help you man up. Yet 40% of men have never spoken to anyone about their mental health, despite 77% of men having suffered with symptoms of negative mental health. So masculinity is at a weird crisis point. And in this video, I want to ask the question, is there such thing as healthy masculinity? And I want to say up front here, I know that this is a controversial topic, which it really shouldn't be, but people have a very firm idea on what masculinity is and how it should be applied in life. So if you are one of those people, I want you to know that I also felt that same way for a long time. And it's with that in mind that I invite you to watch this with an open mind. And if you do feel yourself resisting some of the ideas or things presented here, then that's totally fine. But all I ask is that afterwards, you maybe reflect on why you're resisting these ideas. That's all. So with that being said, let's jump in. So what is masculinity? Firstly, historically, the concept of masculinity and femininity have been divided into men and women. Men were the providers, the patriarchs, the protectors, and women were the caretakers, the counselors, and the cooperators. And people mistakenly assign these traits to natural biology, but ultimately, these are just social constructs that have become the status quo. So when we do think of masculinity and femininity, the qualities in a person are often described in the same way, masculine and feminine qualities. But these masculine and feminine qualities have nothing to do with sex, gender, or roles in a relationship. Masculine energy is often linked with qualities like strength, problem-solving, independence, courage, and assertiveness. They're very kind of logical-based qualities. And then feminine energy is often associated with qualities like nurturing and empathy, cooperation, and intuition. And if you think about it, these are very emotional-based qualities. And when you think about energy in general, there are polarities across the whole of the universe. There's night and day, up and down, east and west, hot and cold. All of these are simply two extremes on two ends of the spectrum. The problem comes when, over time, these energies and these traits become oversimplified, and the view on them can evolve and mutate into something like man equals masculine and logical, woman equals feminine and emotional. But this is never the case in one single person. Every single person on this planet will have their own mix of each of these different traits and energies. But society can often push you to lean into one energy or the other, to push men into masculine traits and women into feminine traits. However, both energies are needed, both traits are needed. For example, if you only ran a country with logic, strength, and courage, problem solving, then you would probably end up being a dictator. If you ran a country only with nurturing, empathy, cooperation, and emotion, then you'd probably be a target for someone to come and invade you. So both of these energies are needed in varying capacities and at varying times. But it's important to note that one side is not better than the other. So women have historically had challenges when it comes to leaning into traditionally masculine energy. They're called nagging when they stand up for themselves and are assertive. Or they're made to feel guilty if they choose to have a career over having kids, for example. And on the other end of the scale, there's the challenge for men, where there's the pressure to not lean into feminine energy. They're told to man up if they feel sad. They're discouraged from talking about their feelings, and if they ever show any weakness, then they're a pussy. Basically, if men are anything other than logical, stoic, never losing, zero emotions, never show weakness, strong, suck it up, then society will try to push you back into that energy. But by leaning all the way to one side of these energies, this is where masculinity can become toxic. You become jammed into one side, and the other side of things starts to disappear. It starts to degrade. And when it comes to feminine energy, which is the sort of emotional side of things, there can be a real challenge for men because we can suffer from a lot of different things like alexithymia, which is the struggle to recognize feelings and name emotions. We can struggle with emotional dysregulation, which as someone with ADHD, that can be a problem. And this is the struggle to manage feelings and being more sensitive to rejection and criticism. And especially if you have ADHD, we can do things such as masking, which is essentially trying to hide any struggles that we may be having. And I have a whole video on ADHD and emotions if you want to deeper dive into that. But basically what I'm saying is that masculine energy can start to take over and the emotional, the feminine energy can start to disappear. The masculine energy becomes overly pronounced. In order for anyone to become a well-rounded human being, you can't just have one side of them. If you're only able to handle the masculine energy, then you're ultimately going to struggle when it comes to anything emotional. And there are real consequences to this. For me as a guy, I was late diagnosed with ADHD and I struggled with my emotions for many years. I always lent into the masculine side. I tried to jump in and solve problems for my partners. For myself, I tried to ignore any feelings that I had because I had this idea that I needed to suck it up and there's no space for feelings. I resisted therapy for literally years while I was telling other people that they should go to therapy and they needed therapy. One of my first therapy sessions, when my therapist first asked me about how I was feeling about the situation that I was in, I literally described the situation in the most factual, non-emotional way possible. And my therapist was, okay, but how do you feel about it? I literally had just described the situation. I didn't even try to understand what I was feeling about it. That's how jammed to one side that I was. So there can be major consequences when you are stuck to one side. And when you are stuck only being able to use masculine energy, there are a lot of ways that this can go wrong. There are a lot of ways that this can harm you. You mishandle conflict because you step over other people's feelings, or you avoid conflict completely because you can't handle the emotions that are involved in normal human conflict. You can be manipulative. You can give people ultimatums, or you can gaslight, you can lie, you can guilt trip because you don't know how to manage your own emotions and your own feelings. So you lean into these ways to try to control other people. This is where masculine energy starts to become problematic because you start to try and control other people because you can't control yourself. You can't manage your own feelings. It can lead to being hostile to people, being unable to take any feedback, ignoring other people's feelings. And ultimately, because you are unable to unjam yourself from this masculine energy, you can develop a victim mindset where you see yourself as a victim of other people, a victim of society, a victim of ADHD, a victim of everything else but yourself. And this means that you become unable to take any responsibility. You start to deflect any responsibility that you have, which means that ultimately you don't really change. So being jammed into the masculine energy can leave you in a real state. And because of this struggle with the emotional side of things, this is why the male suicide rate is significantly higher than the female suicide rate. And this is why discussions of mental health, emotions, and relationships are so important to have. And when it comes to relationships, of course, emotions are super important. So if you want to deeper dive into emotions and how they affect relationships, then join me on my free relationships bootcamp where I dig into all of the tools that you can use and how to strengthen your relationships around you. Click on the link in the description down below to get started. So ultimately, in order to grow as a human being, if you are stuck in your masculine energy, we need to grow that feminine energy. But there are a lot of preconceptions and myths in what that involves. So let me just break some of these down. So the first myth is that you can only choose one energy. If you're looking to grow your feminine energy, it doesn't mean that you lose masculinity. It's not one or the other. You're simply adding another tool to your toolbox. You can grow both of them. You can grow masculine energy and feminine energy. There's also the myth that you should only choose one. You should just choose to be masculine or choose to be feminine, and that's it. But have you ever heard the phrase, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail? That means that if you only have masculine energy, then you will only ever approach things with masculine energy. You'll only ever approach things with problem solving, logic, etc., all of those sort of masculine traits, which means that when you as a human being feel depressed or sad or upset, you're going to try to solve it with masculine energy when it's actually a feminine energy challenge that you have. And this is why, for example, sometimes you see straight men getting broken up with and then they lean into this hyper masculinity. They try to push away their emotions. Or if their wife comes to them with something that happened through work, they'll jump in and try to give a solution. This is, again, just using masculine energy when it needs a feminine energy moment. So, for example, if you have very high masculine energy and your partner comes to you talking about emotions and you only use masculine energy in that moment, then you're using your hammer when you should be using a saw or a chisel. You're using the wrong tool for the job. However, when you grow the tools in your toolbox, If you own a hammer and a saw and a chisel and a sander, I don't know, I'm not really a tool guy, then you're much more equipped to start handling the things that come your way. And instead of trying to carve a piece of wood by smashing a hammer into it, you can use your saw, you can use your chisel, whichever is more appropriate to the situation. That applies here, choosing the right tool. And by growing feminine energy, you're growing your toolbox for the right job. There's also the myth that you can't change your energy. People think that it's biology, but that's BS. It's like saying that you were born speaking English, so you can't learn French. It's actually very doable and very possible. And most people, even if they have very toxic energy, they can change them. If they work to identify where their weakness is, they understand the impact of it, they consciously make changes to change those toxic behaviors, and they're willing to grow as a person. This is what it takes to grow. There's also the myth that you need extremes in energy. People think that you need to have extreme masculine energy or extreme feminine energy, and that will balance out. The idea of, in a relationship, that opposites attract. So while that can be true, the opposite energy with someone else can bring some attraction, the idea of opposites attracting. But if you're stuck in extreme masculine energy can initially attract someone who is looking to be able to express more feminine energy. However, long term, if you're unable to change and flow and find that balance for the right situation, choosing the right energy for the right tool for the job, then this actually shows a limitation in who you are as a person. Because if you aren't able to choose the right energy for the right situation, then the attraction will decrease because you're actually showing that you're not able to grow. You're not able to adapt to the correct situation. You're choosing to grow the skill and learn how to use it in the right situation. So masculine and feminine energy are not mutually exclusive. You don't choose one or the other. If you're low in one, you can learn how to grow it and develop it. And if you're too high in one, you can learn how to manage it and start to reel it back. So when it comes to masculinity specifically, what does it mean to have healthy masculinity? Well, healthy masculinity is being able to use the tools of masculinity, but not to such an extreme, to be able to still introduce the feminine energy. So this means being able to have confidence, but being able to have it balanced with humility. True confidence comes from self-awareness, acknowledging both your strengths and weaknesses, and being able to continually work on yourself and your self-improvement. Being able to practice emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence is understanding, recognizing, and managing your own emotions, as well as being able to be attuned to other people's emotions as well. So developing a high emotional intelligence means that you're able to be empathetic at the right time, listen actively, and be able to communicate effectively. This means that you're able to foster strong and positive relationships. Healthy masculinity is being able to lead by example. So leadership is not about telling others what to do. It's about being able to inspire them through your actions. You'll be able to influence people without trying to control them by showing integrity, commitment, excellence in your own behavior, self-growth. This means that others will be inspired to follow you rather than following you out of fear or worry from the consequences. Being able to embrace vulnerability. So vulnerability is a strength. It's not a weakness. Being able to understand and manage your own feelings and challenges actually shows a lot of courage. And this breaks down the toxic myth that masculinity needs to be about being invincible. Being able to practice respect and equality. Being able to treat everyone with respect. Not having that victim mindset and feeling like the world is against you, but being able to treat everyone with empathy and understanding, and being able to respect people wherever they are, whatever opinions they have. Healthy masculinity involves being decisive and taking responsibility. So being able to make informed decisions confidently, but also taking the responsibility for the outcomes, which means that you need to own your mistakes and be able to learn from them. And that's the hallmark of masculine energy. Being able to foster independence and encourage others to also be independent. So you can still be a source of strength and reliability, but you're also encouraging independence in yourself and those around you. So being able to empower others to make decisions and take action on their own while still getting the support from you at the same time. Being able to be a continuous learner, understanding your own weaknesses and understanding that there is always room for growth. Seeking knowledge, welcoming challenges, and being open to feedback. This is being able to embrace the logic, the problem-solving side of masculinity, while being able to handle your emotions and understanding your weaknesses. And being able to contribute positively to others without expecting anything back. So being able to use your masculine energy for good and to help others without it being in a transactional sense. So being able to grow yourself so much that you are able to give without needing something back from other people. And this is what it means to have a balance, especially in relationships, being able to be interdependent. So you can be an independent person, being able to contribute to the relationship without needing to have the other person give you anything. You're two independent people that are able to give without needing anything back. So how do you develop this feminine energy and start to grow it? Well, the first step is to take responsibility for your emotions. A lot of time, especially when we're heavily in masculine energy, it can be very easy to blame other people for the way you feel. However, if you're taking responsibility, then you're taking responsibility for your emotions as well. You know, if you think about it this way, if you broke your leg, you can't just ignore it. You have to take care of it. You have to take yourself to hospital. You have to be in charge of making sure that it's looked after in the right way. You can't just expect the world to bend to you. So you have to be responsible for developing the knowledge of how you're feeling and taking responsibility to manage those feelings as well. And this involves cultivating emotional intelligence. So it's important to start looking into how emotions affect you on a day-to-day basis, developing self-awareness and understanding what your triggers are, understanding what your thoughts are behind the feelings. Going to therapy. All of these things will start to cultivate the emotional intelligence within you so that you can start being responsible for those emotions. Next, it's important to understand which energy is appropriate at which time. On a very basic level, in conversation, masculine energy needs to be toned down. It needs to be about feelings and emotions, because that's how most people speak. This is why it can be difficult for men to develop deep friendships, is because oftentimes they're speaking in such a logical masculine energy, they're not really talking about feelings, or if they do talk about feelings, then it just gets skipped over because they try to escape that feminine energy sort of moment. So it's important to start learning to communicate on an emotional level, not just a logical level. And then it's important to understand where the toxic ends of the spectrum are and start to steer clear of them. Any extreme in any situation in life is something to be avoided. Life is not about the extremes. Life is about the grayer areas in the middle. So if you find yourself leaning towards the toxic end of a spectrum, then this is where it needs to be dialed back in order to be able to bring some groundedness and bring the other skills into the fray. As well, start learning to collaborate. We can fall for this idea that we are lone wolves and we need to do everything by ourselves. But actually, this is a major weakness. Being able to trust and being able to collaborate is actually a skill. And this is something that I talk about a lot with my members, which is called the lone wolf illusion, which is where you fall for the idea that you don't need anyone else and you don't need to interact with the world around you. You're this lone wolf who's able to do everything by themselves. However, it's a lie and it's a fallacy. And if you want to learn more about the lone wolf illusion, then I will leave you with this video right here. I'll see you over there.